Yes, and we do have audio. Well, anyway. Mr. Rob, do you feel comfortable praying us in? All right. Amen. Thank you so much, Rob. And welcome to everybody. If you're watching live and you did not change your clocks, I know your clock reads something a little bit after 10:30, but we're back on standard time. So I hope wherever you are, you got that extra hour of sleep. Anyway, we are continuing our study of the Gospel of Mark. We are in the big middle of chapter 7, midway, and we're picking up at verse 24. And we're going to read about two miracles, two healings that take place, but in not in the way that you would expect it of Jesus. And that's okay, because there are some other things that are going on that perhaps some lessons to be picked up on. Anyway, before we begin, I have to show you something because um, for those of us, we were just talking about dogs. As far as dogs are concerned, they don't care what time it is or what time change are you talking about? I'm hungry now. Feed me. That kind of thing. If you have ever owned a dog or been very close to a dog and become one of your favorite dogs, you have stories about that dog. And I have stories of my own. I didn't own him, but he belonged to my niece and her husband, a guy named Jake, Labrador Retriever. If you've ever had an experience with labs, they're just sweet dogs, very sweet natured. Jake, most of all. And I mean, he was just a great companion. And he really knew how to behave himself around the house, especially at dinner time. Anyway, here's a picture of him. And this is not just Jake any old time. This was Jake during dinner. Uh, and basically, you know how dogs are. There are some dogs that, hey, when it's time to eat, get the dog out of here because they'll whimper, they'll whine, they'll dance around, they'll bark, they'll shameless beggars. Jake never did anything like this. He modeled the 3 P's that I talk about to folks about, what does it take to be a good writer and to get an interview with someone? Well, I mentioned 3 P's: patience, persistence, and politeness. And this is what Jake is doing. He is at table side, and he is between me and Paco, and we are enjoying a very nice dinner of ribs. And Jake just didn't say anything, or he didn't be obnoxious about it. He would just position himself between me and Paco, not between himself and Lindsay, or Paco and Lindsay, because he knew that Lindsay he wasn't going to go anywhere in terms of being fed at the table. But Paco and me, easy marks, easy marks. He would just sit there like this and be very polite, like he was, hey, if there was a chair here, I'd be sitting here. And maybe you could put a plate in front of me. And anyway, at some point, either Paco or I couldn't stand it any longer. And we would feed him something, and he would very politely and graciously eat it. Well, and you're probably wondering, okay, John, that nice story, but why are you telling us this? Well, because I kind of thought of it as I was preparing for the lesson this morning. So, and I think you'll see the relevance when we get into it. As I mentioned, we're at Mark chapter 7, verse 24. And Jesus he just got through a situation where he had this discussion, this debate, maybe, perhaps, with religious officials. What is cleanliness? What is being faithful to God's law all about? And not surprisingly, the religious officials and Jesus come on two opposite sides. Well, anyway, that is in the middle of a Jewish territory. In verse 24, we read that Jesus left that place and went to the vicinity of Tyre. What is that? Well, he is going north, or pretty much north in the area. He's also going out of an area of heavy Jewish influence. Basically, he's going into Gentile territory. And of course, we're familiar with Tyre and Sidon. Those are two very, very big, important cities in the region, very prosperous, big business kind of thing. David did business with the officials of Tyre and Sidon. So he's in that region. Where is that? Well, in that day, it was known, the country or the region was known as Phoenicia. That name's going to bubble up again. What is Phoenicia? Well, it's actually in the region that we know better as in modern day as Lebanon. So he's gone north, and he's out of this Jewish region. Why is he going there? Well, maybe he is looking for a break. Maybe he is looking for that rare moment where he can get with his disciples and not be constantly sought after and sought out and begged on and so forth. This, the center of public attention. Maybe he just needs that time, some quality time with his disciples. Maybe he just needs rest. Doesn't work out because verse 24 continues, he entered a house and did not want anyone to know it, yet he could not keep his presence a secret. In fact, as soon as she heard about him, a woman whose little daughter was, possessed by an impure spirit, let's call it for what it is, demonic. Not someone. We've seen little episodes like this. We know that these spirits are not someone you want to be messing with or to be bothering you. And here we have another episode like this. It's serious. You don't want it to happen to you. You certainly don't want it to happen to one of your close family members, like a child. And so if it's there, if you're having to deal with it, you do whatever you can. So this mother finds out that Jesus is in the region, and she comes up to him, and she fell at his feet. The woman was a Greek. That's another word. Basically, that's an all-inclusive word for Gentile, anyone not Jewish. Born in Syrian Phoenicia, comes from the region. She begged Jesus to drive the demon out of her daughter, and not just once. In New King James Version, and probably the original Greek indicates she was going on and on and on. She kept asking, she kept begging Jesus, Jesus, help me. And to the point of just almost embarrassment. This is also picked up in the other Gospels, especially in Matthew chapter 15. And it's to the point where the disciples are saying, Lord, send her away. Give her whatever she wants. Get rid of her. That kind of thing. She's getting on our nerves. And for some reason, Jesus is holding off. At least initially, he's not responding. But finally, he does. And he says, first, verse 27, first let the children eat all they want, he told her, for it's not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs. Well, that's kind of a weird response. What are you talking about, Jesus? Well, a couple of things here. Jesus, if you read the Matthew account, Jesus is saying, hey, look, I feel your pain. I understand kind of in that context, but he says, hey, look, I was sent here to minister to the children of Israel. My message is first to them. And basically saying it's my message is primarily for the Israelites. It's for this is their time and their opportunity to respond. It's not really the time or the place for anyone who is non-Jewish. So this is what he means about, hey, I've set the table here for a particular set of people and for particular children, and they need to eat. It's their dinner. It's whom I'm catering to. It's not right to take the meal that I have prepared for this particular group of people and give it to someone else. And the language here is toss it to the dogs. Wow. What does that mean? Well, you know, hey, this gets back to our 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 best friends, our best animal friends, who we, in a lot of cases, they are literally members of the family. We love them. We think of them as like our children. We really do. We sometimes we pamper and spoil them. Oh yeah. Rob, I know you've got a cat and it's a whole different thing with the cat, but with dogs, it's hey, it it's I think of that picture, the painting of dogs playing poker. If they could play poker, yeah, they would hey, how about a couple of rounds, They seem to be that smart and that sweet and that friendly and so forth. Not so much back in first century Israel and Syrophoenicia. Yeah, they had dogs back then, but they were not as highly valued or highly esteemed. You talk about dogs back in that day, most of them were not domesticated at all. They were basically not much better than coyotes or other, or foxes or wild animals. You really well, maybe you might have one around the house, but he probably wasn't an indoor pet if you get my drift. You know, they were a lot of these dogs back in that day, they ran around in packs. They were scrawny, and because they really weren't domesticated, they really more often than not they really didn't know how to behave around people. So, they could at 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 the least they could be a nuisance. At worst, they could be a threat to you. They were the ones who would more than happy to knock over your garbage cans and just make everything a big mess. Gee, you know, and in that context, Jesus is saying, "Look, I have prepared this banquet for a certain amount of people, a certain number of people, a certain class of people, and it's for them. It's not to be tossed or thrown out to the dogs, and the dogs, of course, that's for anyone who's not an Israelite. Now, Jesus does temper his language a little bit. He doesn't say come out right and call them dogs in the original Greek and in some other translations. He softens that word a little bit. He uses, you know, to the degree that yeah, there are dogs that are house animals, house pets, basically. When he makes this comparison, he says, "I'm not ready to toss this to the house dogs." Or some translations go even a little bit further. "I'm not ready to give this banquet to the puppies." Puppies are, warm and cuddly. So Jesus is using, kinder, softer language here if you get into the Greek. Well, you got to love this woman because she is persistent. And by the way, before we get too far down the line, if you read the Matthew account, she doesn't just come up and call him Jesus. She says, look at the language she uses, look at the title. "Oh Lord, Son of David." She knew who Jesus was, and she called him by his proper name. So she knows not only who he is, but she's going to him. She's begging him. This is in your face praying. "Lord, please help me." So she hears this response. Hey, you're not first in line. Got to serve the children of Israel because it's not right to take it away from them and give it to people like you and to give it to the dogs. Look at her response. She said, verse 28, she says, "Yes, Lord." But even the little dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs. Kind of like what our own house dogs do when they are in the kitchen when we're eating. Oh man, they never miss a meal or a mid afternoon or a mid evening snack. They're there. They're ready for it. And she just, Jesus makes this comment and she tosses it right back. And just almost a perfect answer here. So think about the grace in which she exhibited by making this statement. How many people do you know, if they had been the ones who'd come to Jesus and said, "Hey, help me out here. Lord, I need your help. Please heal my daughter." And they get that kind of response, "Not now. No, sorry, can't help you." What would the response be? Not anywhere near the grace or the humility of this woman. They would have said, "Oh, well, who do you think you are? You're not the man I've been hearing about. I'm going to go get help somewhere else," and maybe throw a couple of curses or whatever, and they stomp off. She didn't. She did nothing like this. She's patient. She's humble. And throughout it all, she maintains, she shows that she had her faith in Jesus is unwavering. Lord, I know you can do this. I'm not leaving until you do what I've come to ask you to do. And guess what? Verse 29, Jesus told her, "For such a reply, you may go. The demon has left your daughter." She went home, found her child lying on the bed, but she's not sick, she's not possessed. The demon was gone. She got what she asked for. Jesus met her request, answered her prayer. He did it in an unusual way, and that's, hey, he's Jesus. He can do whatever he wants. And in so doing, our first response is, "Jesus, why did you do it that way?" Well, Jesus had his reasons. And maybe it was to drop a couple of lessons along the way. Hey, I am here to talk to God's own people, the people that God adopted and cradled and loved and has cherished all this time. Uh, I have come here to carry out the rest of God's plan for them. And this is their opportunity. I don't want to be distracted by that. And yet, he is willing to help out this non-Jewish woman, this woman who a Gentile, and as we know what the very religiously rabid Jews felt about anyone who was non-Jewish. They were like those dogs in the street. They were like those packs of dogs. They were not much better than animals. A righteous Jew would never have entered the household of a Gentile woman, let alone, or a Gentile person, let alone have anything to do with them socially. It was just not done. And yet here, Jesus is, once again, he's doing and saying things that are upsetting, are going against that Jewish custom. He is touching lepers. He is talking to women as equals. He is healing Gentile people. Something, by the way, that he's done before. And think of the man with the demonic spirit in the tombs, which, by the way, we're about to call on again in some form or fashion as our chapter 7 continues. Verse 31. And then Jesus, and by the way, so many of these gospel accounts of Jesus's actions are, you can usually find them a corroborating account in at least one or more gospels. What we're about to read here, this is an only in Mark story, exclusive only to those who subscribe to the Gospel of Mark. Think of it as a perk. Anyway, Jesus left the vicinity of Tyre, and he went through Sidon down to the sea. He returns from the inland. He's back close to the coastline, to the Sea of Galilee, and into the region of the Decapolis. The Decapolis, of course, Greek for 10 cities, Where have we heard that before? Well, that was the region that the man with the demonic spirit came from, or he had family or friends or whatever, and that's where he went to after he was healed. Keep in mind, Jesus' earlier response, or the people's response to Jesus at that time. Hey, Jesus, how soon can you bail out of here? You're making us nervous. Don't take it personally, but bye. It's kind of like that. Well, he's back in the region again. And verse 32, there some people brought to him a man who was deaf and could hardly talk. And they begged Jesus to place his hand on him. Now, quite a change there. You suppose it's quite possible, it's not in the scripture, but it's quite possible that maybe this man who was healed and in his right mind had been spending the time telling people about who Jesus was and what he did for him. And after a few head scratching moments, people's response are changing from indifference or hostility to, is he back in town? Maybe we got a friend here who's got a problem here. Maybe he can help. Jesus agrees to help. Verse 33, after he took this man aside, away from the crowd, Jesus put his fingers into the man's ears. Then he spit, and he touched the man's tongue. And we're saying, Jesus, why don't you just say a word and heal him, and which he could. I mean, we've seen Jesus heal long distance. He just did it with the mother and her daughter. But here, this is not only hands-on, but this is saliva on or whatever. He spit, touched the man's tongue. He looked up to heaven, and with a deep sigh said to him, Ephphatha, which means Aramaic term. The term means be opened. And it was. Verse 35. At this, the man's ears were opened. His tongue was loosened, and he began to speak plainly. Like he had been talking all his life. We don't know for how long the man had been deaf and mute. It could have been an entire lifetime. It could have been, hey, something happened. He was okay, and then something happened to him, and then he's got this affliction for whatever reason. But boom, Jesus takes care of it. Well, it's a private session, one-on-one with the man, but word gets out. Verse 36, Jesus commanded them not to tell anyone. And of course, they all obeyed and kept it a deep, dark secret, right? No, basically what happens when Jesus commands people not to tell anyone what he's done, they do the exact opposite. It happens. I really can't blame him. If nothing else, if you are healed of some debilitating disease that has crippled you for life, and probably would have, and people say, what happened to you? You can't help but say, hey, I got to tell you, this guy just came up and one thing led to another, and I'm healed. I'm released from all this. And Mark says the more he told people not to talk about this, to keep it a secret, the more they kept talking about it. People were overwhelmed with amazement. New King James says they were astonished beyond measure. And here they give him a compliment. Keep in mind, these are people from that region that once upon a time told Jesus, hey, nothing personal, but we're a little bit uncomfortable with having you around here. Now it's a big change. It's a big compliment. He has done everything well, they said. He even makes the deaf hear and the mute speak. Praise just flowing up to the skies. And it may possibly be, this shows a change of heart, at least the measure of some people. And so a good day was had by all. Yes. Yeah. Hmm. Yes. Hmm. Isn't that amazing? Yes. Not quite. It's not that easy. Yeah. Hmm. Yes. Hmm. Yeah, or sign language or whatever. Yeah. Darren made, for the benefit of those who may not have been able to hear all of that, Darren made a very good point about think about um, deafness and speaking. If you have been deaf all your life, you really cannot speak all that well because so much of our speaking, so much of speech language is based on what you hear as you grow up. And I mean that's why we have regional accents that go on and on and on because that's the way you hear the people around you talk. But if you've never heard people talk, you really don't know what language sounds like, and you wouldn't know how to do it. And yeah, it Jesus just imagine about that. It was simply not, you know, Jesus could simply have said, "Okay, you can talk now." And you're on your own. And good luck as you learn how to talk like everybody else. But by placing his finger on the guy's tongue, maybe there was something very, very miraculous about that, in which he instilled in the man's mind the ability to talk like everybody else. No, there's no learning curve. Uh, the man is instantly up to speed. And that truly is a miracle. When you think about some of these things that Jesus is doing here, they're miraculous in and of themselves. When you read the same passage over and over again, it's like, oh yeah, been there, done that. But if you think about basically, for lack of a better term, the backstory, what might have really been going on, uh, it's it's all the more miraculous in terms of what Jesus has done. Thank you, Darren. I appreciate that very much. Well, that brings us to the end of chapter 7 and that to the end of the lesson today. We're going to pick up next week in chapter 8. There's going to be more journeys of Jesus. He's going to feed another crowd. We're going to see if the disciples pick up on any lessons that perhaps they might have learned or had an opportunity to learn when he fed this other crowd earlier on. And then there will be some other discussions that Jesus will have that are worth our time and consideration. So if you would, please read chapter 8, and that'll be the basis of our lesson for next Sunday. Thank you very much for being here and for giving me your time. I hope you got something out of the lesson. Hope you have a great week. And if you didn't get that extra hour of sleep last night, hey, what are Sunday afternoons for anyway? Naps. So do it. See you next Sunday, Lord willing.